So I'm Denifan. This is Beeman talking about industrial society, and we're talking about like what the potential downfalls of that society is, and yeah, I think that's a good topic to link to it. So, um, modernity, is it good? Like that's one way to put it as well.
That's a
Um,
bit loaded too.
yeah, for sure. Uh, okay, there we go. So I got that as well. So I got the manifesto up here, uh, and in the window. So put that up there. I don't have it. Fuck off right now. It doesn't need to be in the scene. Okay, so industrial society. Do you feel industrial society is more of a benefit and more of a negative for society?
I don't even know that that's necessarily the correct question to ask, to be honest.
Okay, what do you
Um,
think the correct
so
question asked is?
so I think part of the problem is that depending on in the case of this manifesto, I'm glad that I stuck with it till the end because my big question through most of this was, okay, well, if we're trying to move to a more primitive state, how do we prevent someone from rebuilding the prior society, right? And there's kind of an admission that like some aspects of this are a little bit impractical. Like the reality of it is that for this to go through without a hitch, you kind of have to have everybody on board. It has to be like the global revolution, kind of like what the communists wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the problem is that obviously, unless you're going to like police everybody's behavior or somehow convince everybody that this is the way to go, um, then you're invariably going to get some people who decide to go back to the prior society. And I don't think it's like a 50 or 100 years later thing like Kaczynski suggests. I think that that will be an immediate push by some factions. But I think the thing is the problem might be uh, it might be that the disagreement stems from how the problem is prescribed. So the manifesto I think primarily focuses on the idea that once you no longer have to basically hunt to survive, you lose meaning basically, and that meaning can't really be picked up by uh, other factors. So like now that you're not working to hunt and keep your house together and all these other things, the other things that you're pursuing in place of that aren't able to provide the kind of meaning in your life that the prior set had. I'm not sure that I agree with that. Maybe I've misunderstood, but that seemed to be what was being argued, and I don't think that I agree with that. I think there's a lot of tasks, I guess you could call them, a lot of achievements that one can pursue that go beyond.
All right, so
Uh,
let's just go into the let's just go into the
okay,
manifesto really quickly here. So
sure.
I think that's what we both want to do here. So I think that's what we're going to do. So in the manifesto, the first one that I saw was like feelings of inferiority, like that
Mm-hmm.
section, right? Feelings of inferiority. I mean not only inferiority feelings being a strict sense, but a whole spectrum of related traits: low self-esteem, feelings of powerlessness, depressive tendencies, defeatism, guilt, self-hatred, etc. Right? We argue that modern leftists tend to have such feelings, possibly more or less represented, and that these feelings are decisive in determining the direction of modern leftists, right? And the first paragraph that I have highlighted, right, is paragraph 13, which is many leftists have an intense identification with the problem of groups that have an image of being weak women, defeated American Indians, repellent homosexuals, or otherwise inferior. The leftists themselves feel that these groups are inferior. They would never admit it to themselves that they have such feelings, but it is particularly precisely because they do see these groups as inferior that they identify with their problems, right?
Yeah.
So in this paragraph, he in this section in this paragraph, he's identifying a attribute that has become extremely prevalent in both our and Western society in general. And I feel like that the means by which we are judging people is very very consistent with this philosophical mantra, I guess.
Yeah, I think when he comes back around to these ideologies later, I think he kind of hits the nail on the head, which is that the desire is not to see like group X elevated to the point where they no longer have any problems. The goal is the feeling of having achieved that, such that when you have everybody at the same level, it's still not enough, and you have to look for ever more insignificant things. And I think that's a trend that we've definitely seen. I think he's 100% correct on his assessment of these groups and organizations.
Yeah, I would do as what. Yeah. So yeah, in the same section, their goal instead, race problems serve as an excuse for them to express and their own hostility and need for power. In doing so, they actually harm black people because the activists' hostile attitude towards the white majority tends to intensify um, race hatred. I think it was what was this? The other one is hostility to is to permit. This is in paragraph 21. Both of these quotes are hostility is to promote a component of leftist behavior so that the drive for power, moreover, much leftist behavior is not rationally calculated of the benefit of the people. I don't know, bring it up here, show it on the screen. Is not um, is not rationally calculated to benefit the people whom the leftists claim are trying to help. So like this particular section, like these two quotes, like very well define what I'm seeing within like modern political discourse, right?
Right.
Not so much like left versus right bullshit, but like the left these leftist tactics are being deployed by everyone, right?
Um, I think everyone's a bit much, but definitely a lot of people, yes.
Well, sorry,
Uh,
but both sides of like the rhetoric are using this.
sure. Yeah, both major political factions.
Yes, both major
Um,
political factions are using this.
yeah, and I would say also like a healthy number of the more minor ones, but um, yeah, I don't know. I don't really have much problem with his assessment of leftism, leftist tactics, that kind of thing. Um, it's more when we get into the technological aspect, which is sort of the main thrust of
Well,
the manifesto.
it
That
is, but I particularly like this part because it points out the like these traits, and the other one, the last quote I have is paragraph 25. The moral code of our society is so demanding that no one can think, feel, or act in a completely moral way. For example, we are not supposed to hate anyone, yet almost everyone hates somebody at some time or another, whether he admits it to himself or not. Some people are so highly socialized that the attempt to think, feel, and act morally imposes a severe burden on them. In others, to avoid feelings of guilt, they continually have to deceive themselves about their own motives and find moral explanations for feelings and actions that in reality have a non moral origin. We use the term over socialized to describe such people. When he says we, he's talking about himself, obviously, because he's trying
well,
to
he's
hide.
talking He's talking about a theoretical organization,
Yeah.
of which he is the
He
primary.
he's the
member.
sole the sole member of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's I was more like if someone's watching this, I wanted to explain like what he's talking about weed in this context.
Well, I think this is meant to be it's the Communist Manifesto, right? When my organization arises, this is the pamphlet that we hand out to people, and so the we is singular at present, but hopefully multiple later is basically the way that it's written.
Yeah.
Um.
But I think like one of the things I remember vividly from reading this before was his descriptions of power and power games in modern society. And I think what he's getting at in this discourse is the means by which you're being used by society. Like that's what I get from over socialization, right? Is that like the not only are the lives becoming more technical, but simply existing in society and moving through our society is becoming more and more technical.
It is interesting though that later, so paragraph 201, he states, not that we have anything against social justice, and it's straight up a paragraph about basically how how social justice necessitates some form of centralized power, which I think is correct, but it's amusing to me that after this scathing critique of an entire ideology, he would go, well, we don't actually have anything against like the core tenet of this ideology.
It's 209, you said, right?
201.
201. Let's hear. So, I don't remember. Oh,
Says,
yeah. So, suppose, for example, that the revolutionaries took social justice as a goal, human nature being what it is. Social justice would not come about spontaneously. It would have to be enforced. Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember now.
Yeah. So it says, in order to enforce it, the revolutionaries would have to retain central organization and control. For what they would, for that they would need rapid long distance transportation and communication, and therefore all technology needed to support the transportation and communication system. To feed and clothe poor people, they would have to have agriculture and manufacturing technology, and so forth. So the attempt to ensure social justice would force them to retain most parts of the technological system. Not that we have anything against social justice, but it must not be allowed to interfere with the effort to get rid of the technological system. So, ignoring the fact that, like, within the very premise of that, or within the very message of that paragraph, he must have an issue with social justice.
He has an issue with it because of the need of means of control.
Right. So that to me, like, that's like saying it's the equivalent of doing the real communism has never been tried. Right.
Right.
Like if you try a thing and every single time, like, you know, if I create a device and the device makes food for me, but every time it creates food for me, it lights the forest on fire, and, you know, I'm unable to eat the food that I've created because my house burns down. Evidently, it's not a good food manufacturing process, right?
Dude,
like
that's awesome food manufacturing process. Are you kidding me? I want to be at your house for cooking. Like, that sounds amazing.
But that's the thing, right? Like, if your boot process, it never gets off the ground, then obviously the end results can't come about, can it?
Yeah.
And so if the idea of social justice requires all these things, then you can't say, well, we're not against social justice necessarily. You are against social justice necessarily because social justice necessarily requires these things.
Yeah.
That's not even that wouldn't even be my contention against it. But just going off of his contention against it, that's a little bit odd. Given that.
His contention with social justice and my contention with social justice are very similar. Like, the idea that, like, the problem with social justice, especially today, is really that it is demanding that those around them have equity, like at all costs, right?
Sure.
And I don't think,
My primary issue would be that it necessarily demands at least partial ownership of other people.
yeah, I would agree with
Um, but his primary contention is against it on a technological level, and on that level, he must necessarily be against social justice. But I even find that the notion that he would go on this giant tirade against leftism and then go, well, social justice is fine. That to me is a little bit laughable, to be honest. And I would love to get like a follow up on that, or maybe even just like, yeah, that's not actually what I meant.
that. I mean, Uncle Ted does live just up the road from me, so I could give him a call.
There you go. If you feel so inclined, figure out what that's all about.
It's like, yeah, I don't want to interview or anything. I don't want like a long. I just have like a specific question about
Yeah.
your
About paragraph 201 of a manifesto you wrote decades ago.
Well, I mean, it was an important document to him, so
Sure, but he might not remember the exact wording of everything.
I think he could probably. He would probably be allowed to reread paragraph 201 of his manifesto.
Possible.
The next one for me was conservatives and some other more conservatives and some other advocate more quote unquote local autonomy. Local communities once did have autonomy, but such autonomy becomes less and less possible as local communities become more immersed with and dependent on large-scale systems like public utilities, computer networks, highway systems, the mass communication media, the modern healthcare system. Also, operating against autonomy is the fact that technology applied in one location often affects people at other locations far away. Thus, proceeds at presides or chemical path. Oh my god, parasite. I can't say it. Or chemical use near a creek, pesticide or there we go. Pesticide or chemical use near a creek. Jesus Christ. Many contaminate the water supply hundreds of miles downstream, and the greenhouse effect the whole world, right? So he's talking about the ecological effects, the externalities that the EPA is designed to prevent, right?
Which it evidently does not, but
yeah. But that's a whole nother topic. I'm just saying that like he's talking about externalities from these things. I don't think that the dissolution of modern society is going to prevent externalities.
No, I mean, like we would all basically be reduced to combustion, right? So I don't know why he's going on about global warming when like everybody's going to have to be doing combustion, and you're going to have a lot more redundancy in production.
Yeah, you're gonna have redundant. Like the thing, like one of the reasons I am very much in favor of more local autonomy is because distribution of responsibility allows people to make better choices, right? Like the individual is able to make choices for themselves much better than the individual is able to make decisions for a group. Like it's just
it's even just as simple as like, what does somebody in DC know about life in Utah?
Yeah, or even what does someone in DC even know about life in fucking Maryland? Like
sure, but like even beyond that, right? Like at least they may have visited there. The chances of like your average DC suit visiting Wyoming,
very low,
and seeing how they live, very very low, right? Like the elites refer to these places as flyover states, for fuck's sake.
For right? I mean, like, for a reason. Like they're not the like they literally do like view them as
Yeah.
like what like a blank void. So
Cue the fucking Kyle Kalinske tweet about like why does the land look like this as he's passing over farms.
I know.
And like at least in his case, he was a good sport about people ripping him for it, right? But a lot of these people aren't. They are proud of their ignorance. Um, and so yeah, definitely I agree with the idea of localism. I just the thing about it is, and this is kind of my the crux of my issue with a lot of this stuff is as engineering gets better, the need to have a giant factory out in one location pumping out everybody's everything decreases, right? Like at this point, we have 3D printers, so you can have obviously not to scale, but you can have a tiny factory in your house, or even just something like the the town in Pakistan, where they hand make modern military weaponry.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, all of these things are still constructible on a local level, and as time goes on, as techniques improve, these things become more constructible on a local level. The difference though is that like where are they going with this? The Yeah, the main problem that I see with this is that engineering arguably will allow more autonomy, except where it comes to materials, which I think is always going to be a bit of a, trade networks kind of problem.
I think so too. But the thing that really disappoints me about our country in this context is that most resources can be mined locally. There's very few resources that we need that we use on a daily basis that we cannot get within our own country.
Well,
And
how many? I mean, if we're looking at things going forward, right, and we're trying to say perform the possible Kaczynski goal of like reducing global warming, for instance, right? We might need to start building uh, nuclear reactors for one and solar farms for another, right? How many places have ready access and the infrastructure to access, uh, you know, thorium, solar cells, any of those things?
right, well, one of the primary arguments he makes for that is starting at paragraph 121. Uh, and the section is titled the quote unquote bad parts of technology cannot be separated from the quote unquote good parts.
Sure, but it's also a question of what. So he's not saying that all technology bad. He specifies this later. He
Mm-hmm.
gives the example of refrigeration as an example of bad technology. And the reason why refrigeration is bad is because it forces you to be part of a larger electrical grid. It forces you to be, which isn't true now, right? It forces you to be part of a larger electrical grid. It forces you to have these materials on hand, to be able to build and repair this thing. And so this notion is that like the second you've got refrigeration, you're now tied into this larger system. I fail to see though how this isn't the case if you're living in Texas and you depend on somebody to ship in ice.
Yeah. Well, then you wouldn't have refrigeration in Texas. You would use other means of preserving meats and such.
Sure, but like the notion of like having ice means that you're either hiking up a mountain every X number of like weeks or months, or you're getting somebody else to get it for you, right?
Yeah, I agree. But like one of those. So he says, even if medical progress could be maintained without the rest of the technological system, it would by itself bring certain evils. Suppose, for example, that a cure for diabetes is discovered. People with genetic tendencies to diabetes will then be able to survive and reproduce as well as anyone else. Natural selection against uh, genes for diabetes will cease. Such genes will spread throughout the population. This may be occurring to some extent already, since diabetes will not be curable. can be controlled through the use of insulin. The same thing will happen with many other diseases, susceptibility to which is an effect by genetic degradation of the population. The only solution will be some sort of eugenics program or extensive genetic engineering of human beings so that men in future will no longer be creations of nature or of chance or of God, depending on your religious philosophical opinions, but a manufactured product. So I think like this to me, like this paragraph for this point is one of the more I didn't highlight it. I should have. I forgot. Is one of the really the more poignant points that he makes. Right, is that as we use technologies more, right, more and more we use technologies, the natural processes which humanity grew is growing out of, right? We are evolving to remove ourselves from like biological systems.
Yeah, I honestly like when it comes to the biological systems and that. I think the point of agreement that I have most with Kaczynski is I'm really concerned about uh, the advent of genetic engineering on humans especially.
Mm-hmm. So what is your? I mean, the argument in this particular paragraph is saying that it would be inevitable, right?
Yeah, well, and I think it kind of is proving to be inevitable that we will attempt to modify humanity to be in line with what we think we want out of it. I think that's actually the real danger. Is it's not even necessarily that there's some mastermind that knows how to. There's no God Emperor of Dune here, with his golden path, who has a 3,000 year projection and knows exactly what he wants humanity to be like. We have a bunch of people with a poor understanding of the system, trying to do things to game the system,
Well,
right? Like
a poor understanding of the system and no real investment in the future, which is a Hoppa's point, right? Like,
some of them don't, some of them do, right? Some of the people who are big on this stuff definitely do have uh uh the I guess the correct time preference, right? It's not a matter of that necessarily. I mean, even in the commercialized form of this, right? The goal will be to eliminate diseases, right? The goal will be to eliminate genetic defects. And that's not a short term consideration.
right, yeah. Well, it'll be happening in embryo too, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. But the problem is we don't know what the ramifications of that are.
that's true. We
It
really we really don't. And
like
I agree with the concern. But I'm saying what I'm saying is that's the primary that's the primary thing that he's talking about here is that we're giving up control of by allowing technocrats to technology to come about. We are allowing technocrats to rule, right?
sure, I don't think that necessarily will happen though. Like my concern isn't even necessarily that there will be like a Brave New World style uh caste system whereby people are engineered to be in a certain caste. My main concern is that there will be a trend like maybe it turns out that the genetic code that that fucks up to create one of these diseases is responsible for some benefit that we're not aware of, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's on the one hand it's a disadvantage, on the other hand it's an advantage, right? And now by wiping that whole thing out, we've wiped out one of our advantages. Maybe that advantage comes in handy 100 years from now, right? Maybe it comes in handy 1,000.
Like sickle cell anemia.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's going to be things that we think are bad that aren't, and there's going to be things that are obviously bad that we get rid of that got rid of something good in the meantime. I think the best example of that, to be honest, isn't even in genetics. It's in mental health, where I mean, we're barely beyond in terms of history the point where we thought lobotomies were a really great idea, and you would just get some guy to come up to your house, right? You get a professional to come in and jam an ice pick up under the eyelid and scramble your prefrontal cortex, and they destroyed people's minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the notion that we're going to take a far more complicated system and precisely take out the bit that we don't like is a bit like you giving your your like uncle or your cousin or your grandparents uh, access to like root on a computer and go, well, just take out the bits that you don't like.
I mean, that's what Linux is trying to do anyway. So,
Give your grandparents access to root. I don't know that.
No. I mean, the Linux project just was like, well, we don't like this part, so we're just gonna remove it.
Oh, sure. But that is an easily verifiable and fixable system. A human being is not.
That's true.
I don't care if someone wants to fuck with an operating system, because at the end of the day, I can just use a prior version of it, or not use an operating system at all, and just go the Kaczynski route, right? Just go live out in the woods. But like, if somebody changes my genetics, I'm stuck with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if they have the capability to change it, they have the capability to change it back. But yeah, I get your point.
Well, possibly. It might be that the process of changing it back causes some other knock-on effect, or even just the process of changing it has some knock-on effect that we didn't foresee.
Yeah,
right.
True.
It's a system of which, like, people will go on about, oh well, we've mapped out the human body, we know what everything does. Not really. We've mapped out the mind, we know what the parts of the brain do. Again, not really. We know a decent amount, right? But it's also a little bit like being in IT or being in coding, right? Where like you understand the principle of how something's supposed to work, but in reality, it might be a completely different thing than the thing you think it is, because you're dealing with just such a complicated system. There's so many factors at play that you might be looking in completely the wrong area.
Yeah. So, yeah, like the thing is like any sort of central, like this is the point, right? Any sort of centralization of humanity ultimately is doomed to failure, because
Well, how would you define that as centralization? Like if I decide I on my own want a designer baby, is that centralization?
right, but there's going to be consensus on what is the best baby.
Sure. I think eventually it'll naturally progress to that. Yeah, but
and if you have like if you're using consensus, right, to plan people's parenthood, then inevitably like that consensus is going to be used as a means of control over the people. Which I mean, it's what's happening. It's what's happening now, no, it's what's happening now, and the totally reasonable request for vaccines, right?
So
like,
well, that's a little bit different. But what I would say is, I think our disagreement on this actually pushes me more towards agreeing with Kaczynski, which is that like the only real way to avoid it is not even to try to. It's not a case of it being centralized. It's a case of the technology existing. Period. Right. So like, so
CRISPR existing is fundamentally evil in that worldview.
Yeah. Well, I think it might just be period, to be honest.
No, that's fine. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I'm just making sure I understand the point that you're making.
Yeah. I'm just saying. Butlerian jihad comes about, but instead of machines with minds like men, it gets rid of the ability to modify the core of what is human. That to me is not a tragedy.
The thing that like really scares me about genetic modification is it takes away evolution.
Well, and it also I think the bigger thing is, okay, so say it's successful, right? Say I'm completely wrong and we don't fuck anything up. We make it completely successful. Well, now that you're able to pick the best genes, everyone else has to as well. Right? Like otherwise they are immediately less competent.
Yeah, so
And
it's
so
like
any kind of
it's the Gattaca.
yeah. In any kind of competitive system, if you can choose for only the strongest genes, the strongest genetics, then everyone else is forced to as well. And it's the same thing with like people who are excited about replacing their body parts with like machine parts, which honestly creates more of like a disgust reflex in me than even the genetic modification, because now you're actually mutilating yourself for that advantage, like directly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like if you're like, well, I could, you know, keep this arm, right? But a robotic arm is much better. And therefore I should remove my arm and get a robotic arm. That yeah, it is the transhumanism thing is weird. Like in any variation of it, right? Like the
Yeah.
the one that people like saying that they're going to I don't know put their brain in a computer, right? Let's
Oh
say
yeah, yeah.
like that form of transhumanism that is literally giving up all humanity, right?
Oh yeah.
And it is doing it in a way that the people um, the people around them will never be able to interact with them again.
Well, have you talked to those people?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it is a rejection of humanity.
Yeah.
They reject humanity. That's the problem. But so getting back to the topic though, I think I would agree with Kaczynski on the notion of some technologies simply being evil. I just think that there's a disagreement on where that is and why that is.
I think I
So
think there are definitely evil things that are coming out of technology, right?
yeah, I think there's definitely there's certain
Well,
technologies that really can only be used for
social
real.
media is a perfect example of some evil shit that's coming out of technology.
Yeah.
Like the consequences that we have faced because of our dependence on social media is disgusting. It's a disgusting thing.
Well, and I do think about the fact that, like, ultimately, most of my interactions at this point are online, which is not good or healthy, and it's probably maladaptive to to consider within the context of like
So, oh
what
yeah.
would you want out of a
So,
society, right?
so it's for remember when we were talking to Unforgiven about him
Yeah,
finding a wife and having a wife in a multi-generational family in a city, right?
yeah,
No one wants to do that. No one in a city wants to do that, right?
yeah,
And like I'm talking to one of my friends. I'm like, look, if we combine our incomes, we can easily afford a 5 bedroom, three bathroom house, right? He
yeah,
has a kid, a wife, all that, right?
yeah.
And I'm like, look, we can do that. Like, I want that house, you want that house, and it's somewhere. It's down in Texas is where the house that we
Okay.
saw is, and it's like, I want that house, you want that house, right? And it's in an area that we both would rather live than we were currently at. Like, let's fucking do it. Like,
Yeah.
I got my lease for my apartment right now, but like once this lease is up, fuck it, I'm out. Like, I'm gonna bail.
Mm.
Like, and get this house, like get a nice house, and my friends, like their family will live with me, and I'm okay with that. And it guarantees like socialization, not socialization as Ted Kaczynski is saying, but like actual human contact, right? Like that's socialization.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's really a way for I think that is something that like humans have, I don't know, not neglected necessarily, but have missed out on, I guess maybe would be the right
Well,
word.
so I think part of it, and this is the part that I can sort of relate to, is it's much easier to find people that you have things in common with online, right? Like I can seek, if I wanted to, I could join a community that was just people who think in a way similar to me, and we might disagree on specific issues, but we're similar enough that we can find common cause, right?
Oh yeah, for
Whereas,
sure. Like I have that in so I'm part of a hacker group, right? And uh, and talking about politics, we vast like really disagree on politics. We agree on like the other stuff
yeah,
mostly, like technology stuff, but we like greatly disagree on politics, right? Because they're all collectivists. They're there's like socialists and stuff like that, and that's fine. That's who they are, right? Um,
yeah,
and they're unable to even they're not even able to pretend to give me like the benefit of the doubt, right?
for
They
sure.
they have to have me accept their viewpoint and their worldview in order for any meaningful discussion to happen. It's very strange.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm in a Discord that is full of people who are very religious,
Uh-huh.
and I get along better with those people than I do with a lot of atheist groups because the atheist groups tend to be more along the socialist path,
Yeah,
and
which is very strange. I don't understand
yeah.
why atheism brings people towards socialism.
Oh, I mean, there's a number of different explanations for that.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. Ultimately, the gist of the okay, going back to the manifesto, right? Like the gist of the manifesto, as I see it, right, is that modern society is depriving the human race of finding meaning in themselves, right?
Yeah.
And it is doing that by forcing us to basically look at everything as an abstraction, right? Like,
So I think what it boils down to is because you no longer really have anything that you need to do. It's kind of the rat utopia issue, right? Where you
mm-hmm.
kind of have to find a thing just to pass time. Um, but I
And
think that
we're producing beautiful ones in big cities.
yeah, yeah. But I think that there's some ground between here and there that maybe is written about in one of his other works. Because I understand he wrote more than just this, and we're kind of reading the Communist Manifesto and going, here's what Marx thought right now. But
I'm not.
so
This isn't what Ted Kaczynski thought in his totality. I just want like this specific
sure,
thing is saying that in
yeah,
my
yeah,
interpretation, this specific
yeah.
document is saying
But
that
what I'm saying is it's not going to be comprehensive. So there is going to be
no.
stuff missing, and the stuff that's missing is jumping out at me basically, right? Where I think that there's definitely desires for human accomplishment that are meaningful that go beyond sustenance and procreation basically, right? And I think that
There
there's
are, but like there. So as we've discussed before, right? I think you and I both have had ample time to develop like a moral code for ourselves that is very close to a lot of religious thought, right?
sure,
Um, but those like that moral code was hard won. Like we didn't just
sure.
it wasn't easy to do, and a lot of meaning and I don't know fulfillment in one's life is much more limited by modern society. Like the modern society limits like a man cannot feel as accomplished as easily accomplished in modern society.
Um, I think that it depends on how you decide to frame it and how the people around you decide to live. But I could see that definitely being the case as a generality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just mean that like there are there are things that people accomplish in like even on an artistic sense, right? Like Ted Kaczynski, for instance, um isn't making isn't finding purpose in life through sustenance, right? But he is finding meaning in life. I would hope, and I would hope that he wouldn't consider all of what he's doing a surrogate activity, because that's pretty dark. That he would kill people over that, right? Like that's pretty messed up. That you go, yeah, scientists are doing surrogate activities. I'm also doing a surrogate activity right now, right? So evidently there are things that people
Well,
can find
I
causes
think
for.
I think he thinks what he's doing now is probably a surrogate activity.
Probably, but
Well,
my,
I think what he was doing when he was like living in his cabin in the woods, I don't think he felt that was a surrogate activity.
Sure, and what I would say is that I think what it boils down to is the I think it's kind of he's just brushing up against the rat utopia, where like there's there's more people than there are meaningful positions for them to hold.
Right, and yeah, I agree. But what I'm saying is that he's like, because you as a person are not able to fend for yourself,
Mm.
not in the sense that you are incapable of it, but because of modern society is sort of guiding you away from that path, that it is preventing humanity from finding fulfillment.
Well, what I think it is ultimately I think his plan in the strictest sense would work, because I think once you take out GMOs and factories and modern medicine, most of the population is going to die.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you
So I think his plan would ultimately work for the goals that he has, but not for the reasons that he states. It wouldn't. It's not that it would work because there's no factories. It's that it would work because there's no people, right?
yeah,
If you were to somehow have a smaller number of people, and this is kind of what I keep coming back to, right? Like I think if you had a small compound in the woods that had its own, like you have a 3D printer and you have whatever you need to make the materials for said printer, and like even if you had something like the Star Trek fuck, what's it called now, the
replicator.
thank you, the replicator. um so you're in the woods, you have a Star Trek replicator, right?
The
i think
ultimate
there's
3D printer.
I think there's still room for people to find meaning in their lives.
Yeah, yes, I agree, but I think part of the problem that I think can be solved by technology is the need for um, for like interconnectedness, right? Like
Mm.
there is plenty of, so for example, in the state that I live in now, there's plenty of land that is relatively cheap that I could buy with a group, and I could just go out and I could start like being in that society. The problem
Yeah.
is that I can't do that because of the means of finance that I have for my life, right? Like if
What do you mean?
I huh
What do you mean?
so the means of finance for my life is my economic value in society is that relies on computers. In order for me to
Oh yeah,
have a
yeah,
job
yeah.
that exploits that economic value, I have to be in a city and I have to have those interconnectivity.
Yeah, we are the end state of Kaczynski's musings on schooling, and I definitely agree with that. That like ultimately we've been trained to exist within a society that depends on this technology. That doesn't actually make me more loyal to it, though. The thing that I've noticed is like, if you
Oh
were to
no, it
say,
definitely doesn't make me more loyal to it.
yeah,
If anything, it like especially in my particular field in cybersecurity, it makes me more prone to seeing the flaws in it, right?
yeah, I've
Like,
actually I've been toying around with this idea for a little while, that like basically there's two pathways once you move into information technology as a whole,
mhm.
and it's that you either become a cyborg or a luddite.
Yeah,
Um, either
that's not unfair.
yeah you either embrace the machinery entirely and become dependent on it, or you start looking for a way to like jump back in time to like the 1800s. There's
You
not
join the machinist cult of Warhammer 40K, or you
yeah
join the orcs. Like that's your.
yeah it's really quite fast, and this is sort of held for like a lot of the people that I've talked to. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But
I think
but yeah, I think
no, I think that technology is amazing, right? And its utility is fantastic.
yeah,
And I feel that we rely on it too much.
yeah.
Like that's really it. Like the things that we have created are amazing, but the way that we are using it is so wrong, and it's so wrong uh, because we're trying to build another like another golden age of the United States, right? Like we're more and more centralization was the key, and we're using technology to basically reinforce those tenets. And that's the problem with
So
that's the problem I have with progressivism, right? Like
yeah.
the state and the administrative state, like within the country, is not good. It's not. We are not trying to allow people to live without the yoke of governance.
Yeah.
We are trying more and more and more to intrude on their lives, like down to the cent. It is amazing to me.
So what I would say as well is I think a lot of this stuff is this sort of the macro micro level that I've been thinking about more often lately. So when you're what technology effectively allows us to do is increase the scope in terms of like land mass basically that we could possibly occupy. So
Mm-hmm.
like if you have familial connections and you're living in say 1400, the second you move to another town, it's difficult for you to keep in touch with your relatives because you either have to travel back, which may take hours or days,
Days. Yeah.
right? And or you have to send a letter, which also will take a similar amount of time. It'll just be someone else who has to do it instead of you, right? So it's less feasible for you to even leave the town that you grew up in, right? Where now I could move to Alaska, right? Which is quite a distance from where I am right now. I could move out to Germany. I could move out to Japan, and I could phone my relatives, and if they were having financial trouble, I could wire them money or vice versa. And so the range at which I can still be somewhat connected, not necessarily terribly connected, but somewhat connected with my family, is much larger, which also alleviates things like, you know, the town I'm in can no longer support any more people. There's not enough land. We can't expand because there's mountains around us, or the land is not really able to grow many more crops, or there's simply not enough jobs for me to do in this town. And so I'm going to move to the next one. I can keep in touch in that case, right? So there's an advantage there, um, but it's kind of the nation's issue on a smaller scale. So like one of the concerns behind the idea of simply opening up the U.S. Mexico border is that there's never any incentive for somebody to stick around and help Mexico, because if they can get themselves out and they can get the people they care about the most out, which is very possible
Yeah,
if it's an open border.
most people coming across the border aren't Mexicans though.
Sure. But like even from the basic premise of like the
No, no, I
humanitarian
get
argument
it. No,
for it.
I get it, but I'm just saying like the thing is that it's mostly like Honduras and Guatemala. That's
But
like
it's the same thing just for another country, right?
I get it. I get it. But what I'm saying is that the the migration is like all economic, right? I don't know.
But
What's the population of Guatemala?
I don't know, but the population of Guatemala shouldn't simply up and move to the United States is sort of my point,
No,
right?
but
Like that.
I like freedom and free enterprise. Like if we get enough people together, maybe we can just like take over Guatemala.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're going the other way. I'm all for that. No, but the thing is, right? If everybody can just
They got 17 million people. They probably have like a few liberal minded people. Like
yeah,
let's
um,
overturn the population of Guatemala.
let's just find a small island and get enough people on one side so we capsize it.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
but
Well, no, if you look at one of the interesting like population trends. If you look at Guatemala, right? So there were in the 1950s there were 3 million people in Guatemala,
Yeah.
and then their yearly change was like 3% then, and
Hmm.
now the yearly change is 1.9%, and they have nearly 20 million people.
Yeah.
So, like the the idea that like sort of the idea that Kaczynski is like proposing in his book, right? Is that there's no way to change these things, right? There's no like it's inevitable, and this is a common thread that I've seen in a lot of academic writing. He is academic.
Yeah.
Um, is that the trends that we see are unchangeable. Like they're not fun. They're unfun. Like there's no way to make a difference on these trends, right?
Sure.
And I just don't see that being the case. Like if it like every modern country is now like basically going the opposite way in population growth,
Yeah.
and to the detriment of Japan and China, for example, right?
And the West.
Yeah, in the West, and the United States hasn't quite gotten there.
Well, Canada is just fudging the numbers by importing people at a rate of almost 500,000 per year.
Yeah. Well, that's the other part of it too. In the United States, is like the United States were importing second class citizens. Like that's what we're
Yeah.
doing.
And
And
and so but the problem I see with that is that ultimately, if you're going, well, that country sucks, so we're gonna let those people live here, why would that country ever get better?
yeah, yeah,
Like the people with the capability
motivation and skills to change it are moving out.
and the resources, right? Like the people who have the resources to come here and do well here are the people who would be fixing that place
Yeah.
if they couldn't come here.
Right.
Um, and obviously, it's not necessarily
I
your
mean,
responsibility.
that's not always the case. I mean, like the people that left Britain to come here weren't the ones that were gonna fix Britain, but
I mean, they built a country that was stronger.
that's true.
So like if anyone was going to fix like Britain not that long ago had problems with rolling blackouts, right?
Mhm.
Do you think that if the Americans never left Britain, if that like genetic pool was still there, if those values were still there, that they would have gone through an entire like socialist shithole moment?
Yeah, probably not.
Or like the people who built up Japan, right? Like I mean they stayed there and then ultimately the culture changed, right? But if Japan had retained the attitude that it had in the
uh,
Showa era.
I mean, the attitude. I think so. Here's the thing. I think what happened was the the Japanese lost because of their zeal. Right, they lost a
I'm not
generation.
talking about world. I'm not talking about World War II.
I'm talking about. Okay, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about post World War II Showa. So I'm talking about the reconstruction of Japan.
Okay.
The ascent of Japan until the bubble, after which point Japan kind of like remained in this weird stagnant form.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like Japan, Japan gets nuked twice.
Mm-hmm.
Japan gets completely dumped on, right? Uh, Not necessarily unfairly, right? They did start a war with a world power, and they bore the consequences of that.
Mm-hmm.
But they come back, they completely modernize their country. Like they come back better than ever before, and it's to the point where in the '80s, everybody's war. Ted Kaczynski references this, right? If we don't keep up with the Japanese, they'll outdo us. They'll outproduce us. That's where Japan was. Japan's nowhere near that now,
That's true. That's true.
right? So getting nuked twice, getting demolished, getting your major cities firebombed into oblivion, comes back, becomes almost a world power, becomes a production powerhouse.
They're a world power. They're definitely a world power. They're
They're
not.
they're definitely on the smaller end.
Yeah.
I think part of that's because the
Yeah.
U.S. overshadows like everybody else, but
Yeah, I mean they're part of like G20 and the G7 and
Sure,
all that stuff. Like
absolutely.
they're like one of the most powerful. Like, they're like I think they're like eighth or sixth or seventh or eighth or seventh. I can't remember which one. Largest economy in the world. Like they're
But do you think that their trajectory growth matches that of the prior era? Like
uh
it's slowed tremendously, and they're kind of they're running into a lot of problems now, like culturally, um, politically, from what I understand. But I don't understand a ton about Japanese politics, to be honest.
neither do I.
Um,
I'm not even gonna try and touch that with the 10-foot pole.
yeah,
I know that one of their princesses got kicked out of the royal family for marrying somebody.
every royal family's having problems now, eh?
Yeah.
Once the incest age was over, it all went downhill.
It was just
This
a
this is
disaster
this
from
is what
there.
this is what they took from you.
No, no, it's
Um,
like when a princess marries, it's not a trouble thing. It's just if you're in the royal family in Japan and you marry someone outside of royal lineage,
yeah,
then you're just out of the family. Like you get
that's what
like
I'm saying.
you get like a dowry
Once
and then you're out.
once the incest era is over, it's all downhill.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just it's
What will we do without our hemophiliac children?
exactly. Oh
Um,
man, poor Russia. Uh,
um, but yeah, no, the yeah, and I definitely think I think it. I did find that bit funny though, where he's talking about, uh, what will we possibly do if we can't create more cars than Japan, right? It's definitely not the part that necessarily matters.
no, it's not.
Um,
I think one of the biggest parts of our civilization being wrong is really the like exportation of our externalities, though. Like
mm,
basically like just giving everything over to China. Like so we're not actually like economic producers. We're just like just being consumers is a big problem.
I mean, Canada's always kind of been like that, to be honest. Um,
Yeah, but Canada has a dearth. I know that you no, you don't actually. Why were you like
yeah.
that? I was gonna
Canada,
say
Canada, Canada has always shipped shit down across the border so that the U.S. could produce it and sell it back to us, and now the U.S. just ships it to China.
yeah,
So,
yeah. We
and
have
now we actually ship it to China. So,
yeah. You skip us. You ship it to China
yeah,
directly. But yeah, like if you buy a skateboard, it's made with Canadian trees that are shipped
yep,
to China and
yep.
then come back to Canada.
Well, you know why that is, though, right?
Yeah, it's the labor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it offsets the shipping.
yeah. Like the fact that you can ship something across the ocean and back, and it's cheaper than paying Canadians is pretty absurd.
Yeah, and like, that's the whole purpose of tariffs too, though. Like,
Yeah, but like the tariffs are there to offset the fact that ultimately Canadian workers cost more than the product is worth.
yes, yeah,
That's really what it boils down to. Like we pride ourselves on having all of these labor laws, right? Which like from just a general perspective makes sense, right? But this notion that we're just gonna keep like raising the minimum wage and all this, eventually we're gonna price ourselves out as humans.
yeah,
And I think this is another thing that like kind of does speak towards the strength of Kaczynski's position, which is that we're ultimately via our own desire to not have people be poor or downtrodden, we're we're making it so that ultimately we will all be replaced,
by robots.
well, but by robots, and they won't do as good a job for sure, but they'll do it for cheap.
Well, they don't need to do as good a job. They just need to do a good enough job.
They just need to do a job that continues to make profit while not costing as much as a human laborer.
Yeah,
And honestly, I think Amazon actually had pegged that a few years ago at the $15 mark. That
mm-hmm.
if minimum wage goes above $15 or even at $15, they're just going to start looking at removing everybody from the warehouse.
Yeah, and
Now
yeah,
now granted, they're not a particularly good employer, all things considered, even within like a relative modern sense. Unless you're going to like China, obviously, then definitely I think a lot of those people would prefer to work at Amazon. But for jobs in the West, they're definitely like pretty close to the bottom of the pile. But certainly, I'm sure those people would rather work at Amazon than not work.
Yeah, the thing is that like the quality of work needs to be better. Like
Sure.
the not the quality of work, sorry. The quality of product needs to be better. Right? Like the thing that made America what it was really was internal trade, right? And our ability to internally trade with ourselves, right? Like a man could get a job working at a factory, and then that factory job could then be the thing that gets it for him, right? Like it's a thing.
Just make America Swiss again.
Make America exactly. All right, well, I think that's been a little bit over an hour, so I think that's about it. Good conversation as always. Thank you very much, and yeah, do you have any final thoughts?
No, we might actually have more stuff to talk about regarding this manifesto next week though, because we definitely didn't get through all of it.
We definitely did not. I agree with that. I think it's gonna be a two-parter.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's do this again next week, and talk to you then.
All right.
All right, so let's do the clap real quick. I just need to, I need a clap at
I
some
just stopped
point.
recording.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's fine. I think near the beginning you ask me a question and I answer on my recording, so
all right.
we'll line up off that.
We can line up
It,
off
it,
that.